Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Today in the rLounge, what happens when someone goes off the rails and you finally decide not to lie down on the tracks? Let's get into it. Up first, if you've ever wondered what happens when jealousy meets unlimited internet access and too much free time, buckle up. Am I the a-hole for removing my sister from my will after she spread malicious rumors about my wife? My wife and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. When my grandfather passed 3 years ago, I inherited a substantial amount from his investments. We're talking generational wealth level. My sister has always known about this, and honestly, our relationship was decent until my wife came into the picture. A couple of days ago, I got a text from a college buddy I haven't heard from in months asking if everything was okay at home and if I needed to talk. I had no idea what he meant, so I asked him to explain. He sent me screenshots of messages he'd received from someone claiming to be a concerned family member, saying my wife was cheating on me with multiple people and draining my accounts. I was confused as hell. My wife and I went through our finances together that same night. Everything was exactly where it should be. She's never asked me for extravagant things. We split household expenses proportionally based on income, and she insisted on keeping her financial independence when we got married. The next day, another friend reached out, then another. 5 people in total in 2 days, all receiving similar messages through Instagram DMs from burner accounts. The messages were detailed too, mentioning specific restaurants we'd been to, dates we'd gone on, even our upcoming vacation plans. This was someone who knew our lives intimately. Then my wife came to me crying. 3 of her coworkers had received friend requests from fake Facebook profiles, followed by messages claiming she was a gold digger who married me for money and was planning to divorce me and take half. The messages included details about my inheritance that I'd only ever discussed with immediate family. I started making calls. My parents hadn't told anyone about our financial situation. My brother lives overseas and barely keeps up with family news. That left my sister. When I called her, she was immediately defensive before I even asked anything specific. That's when I knew it was her. I drove to her place that same day. She denied everything at first, then started crying about how my wife had changed me and how I don't have time for family anymore. I pointed out that we had dinner with my parents twice a month, and I'd invited her to multiple events she'd declined. She pivoted to how my wife was obviously using me and that she was just protecting me. The next day, she admitted through text that she'd maybe mentioned some concerns to a few people, but claimed she was just looking out for me. I told her those concerns were completely fabrications and demanded she tell me everyone who she's contacted. She refused, claiming she didn't remember exactly who she talked to. That's when I knew this was worse than I thought. I discovered she'd been running the campaign for at least 2 months. She'd been systematically contacting anyone who connected to me or my wife on social media, trying to poison our reputations. The burner accounts all had similar patterns, created within days of each other, only used to send these messages. My wife's boss called her in for a conversation. Someone had sent an anonymous email to the company's general inbox making accusations about her moral character and suggesting they should reconsider her position. Her boss was cool about it and recognized it as harassment, but the damage to her professional reputation was done. People were talking in the office. I'd had enough. I called my estate attorney. My sister was listed as a beneficiary in my will for a substantial amount. We were talking 7 figures. I'd set it up years ago when we were closer, back when I thought family actually meant something. I spent 2 hours going through all my documents and removing her from everything. She's not getting a single dollar from me, alive or dead. My parents called after my sister apparently went crying to them about being cut off. She somehow found out about the will change, probably because she'd been asking them about my finances. My mom tried the whole, "she's family" speech. My wife and I went to the bank and restructured everything. We created new accounts, changed beneficiaries, updated all our legal documents. My sister had been listed as a backup executor. Not anymore. My brother, despite living abroad, is now handling everything if something happens to us. I got a lengthy email from my sister. It was full of excuses about how she thought she was doing the right thing and how my wife had stolen me from the family. Zero actual apology for the lies. Just justification after justification about how she was protecting me and how she couldn't stand by and watch me be manipulated. Then I discovered she'd also contacted my wife's parents, telling them their daughter was a cheater and that they should talk sense into her before the divorce. My wife's parents, thank God, immediately called us to verify. They'd found it suspicious from the start, but wanted to make sure we knew someone was spreading lies about us. I changed the locks on our house. My sister had a key from before we got married, from back when she'd water our plants during vacations. I also updated our security system and added cameras. The paranoia was real, but justified. My wife had been holding it together through all of this, but the stress finally hit her. She'd lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks and was barely sleeping and constantly worried about what else might surface or who else might have been contacted. I reassured her that legally and financially, we've done everything we could to protect ourselves. Edit. I made a Reddit post because I genuinely wanted outside perspective on whether I'd overreacted by cutting her off completely. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments validating that cutting her off was not just reasonable but necessary. Some people shared similar stories of family members sabotaging marriages out of jealousy or control issues. It made me realize the pattern was more common than I thought. My wife started getting her confidence back after a few weeks. We'd weathered the worst of it. Her coworkers rallied around her once they understood it was a harassment campaign from a jealous family member. My friends apologized for even questioning things. The truth was out, and my sister's lies had been exposed to everyone who mattered. Fast forward a bit, and I discovered the situation was even worse than I initially thought. Remember how I said my wife's boss was cool about the harassment? Turns out the anonymous email to her company wasn't the only one. My sister had sent similar messages to 3 major clients my wife was working directly with. One of the clients forwarded the email to my wife's company as a courtesy heads up about potential character concerns. The company launched an internal review. Even though my wife was eventually cleared after we provided evidence of a harassment campaign, including the burner accounts and message patterns, the whole process was humiliating for her. She had to sit through interviews, provide documentation of her personal life, and essentially prove she wasn't the person my sister had painted her to be. I compiled everything, every message, every email, every witness account. I took it all to a consultation. Turns out what my sister did has legal implications. We're talking defamation, harassment, potentially more depending on how everything was framed. I didn't make any decisions immediately, but I wanted to know my options moving forward. My sister somehow found out I'd been to see an attorney. She sent me a frantic voicemail after I'd unblocked her number briefly to see if she'd make contact. She was begging me not to destroy her life over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. 2 months of systematic harassment was a misunderstanding in her mind. I decided to move forward with the legal action, not because I needed the money, but because my wife deserved vindication. Her reputation had been damaged professionally. The legal filing was submitted. My sister would be served within a week. I didn't tell my parents beforehand because this wasn't their business, and I wasn't asking for permission. My sister got served. The meltdown was epic from what I heard through family channels. She tried to reach out to my wife directly. She sent her a long message about how she never meant for things to go this far, and how she just wanted what was best for me. My wife blocked her immediately and forwarded the messages to our attorney. Even in her so-called apology, she was still blaming my wife for coming in between us. My sister had to turn over her devices and accounts. The burner accounts were traced back to her IP address because she'd been sloppy, creating them from her home network. There were dozens of messages we hadn't even known about. She'd contacted people from my high school, my wife's college friends, even distant cousins I haven't spoken to in years. The scope of the harassment was staggering. Over 70 individual people had been contacted. 70! My sister had spent hours upon hours crafting these messages, creating fake accounts, researching people's connections to us. This wasn't impulsive jealousy or a moment of weakness. This was obsessive, calculated behavior over an extended period. My wife's company formally apologized to her and issued a statement to the affected clients clarifying that the allegations had been proven false and originated from a harassment campaign by a family member. Her reputation was being rebuilt. My sister's attorney reached out about settling. She wanted to avoid this going further, probably because discovery had revealed just how extensive her campaign had been and how damaging it could be for her if everything became public record. The initial offer was insulting, basically an admission of sending some messages and a nominal payout that wouldn't even cover our legal fees. We declined immediately. A second settlement offer came in a couple weeks later, much more substantial this time, including a formal written admission of harassment, the public apology, and an actual financial compensation for the damage to my wife's career and reputation. We were considering it, mainly because my wife wanted this over with and behind us. We accepted the settlement. My sister had to admit in writing to every aspect of the harassment campaign. She had to post a public apology on her social media acknowledging her lies and the damage she'd caused. She had to pay the damages that, while not bankrupting her, definitely hurt her financially. And she had to sign an agreement never to contact us or anyone associated with us again. Any violation would result in immediate legal action. The public apology went up on her Facebook and Instagram. It was comprehensive and humiliating. Within hours, her comments were flooded with people calling her out. Some of the people she'd contacted directly commented, expressing their disgust at what she'd done. So here we are. For anyone wondering if I'm the a-hole for removing my sister from my will and pursuing her legal action against her, I don't think I am. No, you're not the a-hole. You're someone who responded proportionally to someone who went wildly off the rails. That's not big sister concern. That's a coordinated attempt to destabilize your marriage and damage your wife's livelihood. When someone invests that much time trying to burn your life down, you don't owe them softness. Family isn't a lifetime immunity clause. If anything, betrayal from family cuts deeper because they know exactly where to aim. You didn't overreact. You reacted to someone who made it clear she was willing to escalate without limits. You protected your wife. That's the right call. What would you have done? Up next, a man who believed struggling at a new skill was evidence of personal failure. My 23 female boyfriend, 23 male, of 1 year is bad at everything, and it's making me lose respect for him. Okay, so I am going crazy in my head here because I don't know if I'm just the world's hugest witch or what. Basically, my boyfriend, let's call him Steve, is just not good at doing anything. Wait, that's not true. He's good at outdoorsy stuff and is apparently pretty good at his job in catering. Aside from that, for example, I feel like I can't do anything with him that involves any skill or even slightly competitive because 1, he's a sore loser, and 2, he never wins. When I stayed with his family over Christmas, they had a Scrabble board, and because it was snowy and boring, of course, I tried to pass the time playing Scrabble with him, and I'm not even a good Scrabble player, and I still crushed him every game, and eventually, after a few, I just couldn't play anymore because I had to spend like 10 minutes after every game making him feel better about himself. After giving up on Scrabble, we switched to playing Sorry. We had to stop that too because I couldn't handle the mental toil of continuously beating him at Sorry. Another time, we went to a board game night with some friends, and he couldn't understand the rules for most of the board games and after vented me about how stupid the games were, and why there was no point having rules so complicated no one could grasp them. He was the only one who couldn't grasp them. Other times, we'll play casual stuff like air hockey or foosball, which I don't think even required any strategy other than spinning the little plastic dudes really fast, and he'd still lose every time and get upset about it. I don't care about winning. I just want to have fun, and it feels like it's impossible to have fun because playing anything with him feels like playing against a gosh darn 5-year-old. But wait, this thread isn't entitled, "My boyfriend is terrible at games." So here's some other stuff. His internet stopped working a while back, so he called me and I told him to use his mobile data to download the troubleshooting manual for his router and see if he could fix it. He didn't manage, so I went to his place later and found he downloaded the manual for the wrong router. It wasn't even the right brand. I ended up fixing the problem, and when he ranted to me about how all these router manufacturers make their manuals so hard to use, like there's some sort of deliberate conspiracy to everyone in perpetual confusion unless they're a genius. I'm not a genius. I'm just capable of following simple written instructions. Also, he wants to go back to school to do a master's degree, but he needs to do some prereqs, including a math unit where he's struggling with a lot of the material. But as far as I can tell, it's all stuff he learned in high school. Lately, he's been posting Facebook updates about how hard it is to learn logarithms. My school covered logarithms in grade 9, and even though I can't remember how to do them off the top of my head, I don't recall them being particularly hard at the time, and aside from that, I'm getting tired of being expected to be sympathetic when increasingly I just want to yell, "Well, maybe if you weren't such a dummy." But if I even hint that maybe he should be able to deal with his own emotions, for example, "Honey, you know I couldn't get the pizza dough the shape you wanted, but it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, right?" I get accused of being unsympathetic to his feelings. Well, what about my feelings that I don't want constant rolling coverage of every tiny thing that bothers you? But he's also an incredibly sweet, hardworking person who treats me well, and his boss and coworkers all say he doesn't just work hard, but is actually really competent at his job, and he did pretty well in high school, and he lived on his own since he was 16 and kept himself alive the whole time, and no one else has ever said or hinted to me, "Gee, your boyfriend is kind of a dummy." So what the F? Is it me? Am I the crazy one? Am I a witch? Too long didn't read. Boyfriend struggles with board games instructions, technology, high school level math. I struggle with mounting resentment. Can this be worked out? What does it even mean to have such ugly thoughts about your significant other? Update. 2 months later. I'll save you some scrolling. We broke up. This is pretty long and rambling and probably not even relevant, but typing it out helps me sort out it in my head, so you might as well come along for the ride. Some more background. My ex graduated with a degree in biomedicine last year, but never actually looked for work in his field, as far as I know. This didn't strike me as a problem at first, since he's always taking care of himself just fine, and he never seemed that enthusiastic about his degree anyway. I spent several years after high school working odd jobs while I figured out what to do with my life, most of the way through nursing school now. So who am I to judge, right? But gradually I just got more and more of a sinking feeling about things, mostly because he kept talking about how he wanted to get a PhD and become a professor. And I felt professorship was a pretty optimistic goal for even the most brilliant of students. But how do you tell your boyfriend that you think their dreams are wildly unrealistic? So he decided he was going back for his master's. Cool. After I posted the original thread, I realized I'd never really spoken to him about his negativity while we were both calm. So I sat him down one day and told him that while I was always going to be there for him in times of real distress, I couldn't take all the complaining anymore. About his coworkers, about his housemates, about losing at games, about the train system, about math, about art majors. Apparently they all work at Starbucks. The one time I pointed out the irony of this, he went real quiet and later told me I really hurt his feelings and to not strike such low blows in the future. Guess I missed a hell of a red flag. I told him it was exhausting to constantly have to attend to one crisis after another and that perhaps he could benefit from seeing a therapist. In addition to everything else, he's also had depression on and off, and I figured it was a good chance to learn better coping skills. Well, that didn't go over well at all. He immediately accused me of not caring about his feelings and that he should be able to say whatever he wanted to me. And psychologists just want to give you happy pills to make you think like everyone else. When I told him psychologists aren't licensed to prescribe medication, he went silent for a while and he said, "It doesn't matter. They still want to convince you it's fine to be a loser and everything is okay with you." I asked him if he thought he was a loser, and he said he doesn't think he's a loser. He just thinks it's important to stay aware of your flaws and punish yourself when you mess up, which is why he runs so much. What? At this point, I end the conversation because I don't know what the F to say. The other thing that had been bothering me progressively more is that he's currently taking units so he can start his master's next semester. But it struck me as kind of weird that he had to take math and science prereqs considering he already had a degree in biomedicine. I'm pretty sure he graduated. He has a photo of himself in his gown on Facebook. But every time I tried to ask, he'd hand wave it away like he was hiding something. Of all the problems in our relationship, this was the only one that made me feel like I might be nuts. Because, for all I knew, there was a perfectly simple explanation. But why the evasiveness? Anyway, reading back everything I wrote feels super weird because there's a lot of crazy crap, and it's like, well, sure, that happened. But it wasn't like that. But maybe it was. After my failed attempt at talking, I felt like a giant dummy for not realizing the relationship was doomed from the start. But I was dreading actually breaking up with him until the boat ride. So in my town, there's a few places you can hire a little sailboat for an hour and sail around on the water on the summer. Fun couples activity, right? Before the horrible talk, we'd made plans to do this, and he didn't know I was going to break up with him, and I was still clinging to the hope of fixing our relationship. So we went sailing. All went well for about 10 minutes until we had to turn the boat, and of course, turning a sailboat can be tricky if you've never done it before. As we're trying and failing to turn the boat, I can see him getting more and more agitated, and I try to lighten the mood by joking about our struggles, and he replies with something like, "Oh, sure, it's fine to be crappy at things. Who needs the standards?" And "I should have known not to expect to be good at sailing." I tell him there's no reason he needs to be good at something we're just doing for fun, and to just try to enjoy the activity. Something that I'm sick of saying, and he's evidently sick of hearing because it sets him off on one of his rants about how he can't do anything right, and people who don't care how well they do are dummies. Everyone is a dummy. I just want him to be happy with being a dummy. The boat is stupid. Sailboats are stupid. Our town is unreasonably windy, etc. After that, he's too upset to talk and snaps at me every time I ask him to hold a rope or whatever, all because he had trouble turning an effing hire boat. So I turned to him, yelled, "You're dumped," jumped into the water, and swam back to shore. Just kidding. I only did that in my imagination. I broke up with him a couple days later. There's a difference between struggling and spiraling. Plenty of people lose at Scrabble without needing a post-game emotional debrief. Plenty of adults can't turn a sailboat without declaring war on wind, water, and standards. The problem wasn't that he wasn't good at everything. The problem was that he treated every tiny failure like it exposed some cosmic injustice, and somehow you were responsible for cushioning the blow. That's exhausting. You weren't his girlfriend half the time. You were moral support. When someone's energy slowly turns you into a person who's constantly thinking, "Oh my God, please just handle this like an adult," that's your nervous system filing a complaint. Savage truth? You didn't want to spend the next 40 years explaining to a grown man that not winning at sorry does not require a crisis of faith. Have you ever been in a similar situation? share it with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.